Welcome to Create Great. This podcast series features conversations with creative people from different backgrounds, from different disciplines, and different schools of thought. Thank you for choosing to listen. This podcast is hosted by me, David Bennett, Creative Director of OPX Studio and Curator of Visual, an online showcase. The best creatives will always strive to create something great, and I wanted to explore how they go about this, what it means to them, their clients, and what it means to our wider society too. My guests are individuals whose work I've admired and often featured over the years on Visual, but I wanted to create this podcast to get to know the real people behind their creative work. I'll be asking questions about their own unique stories of how they got to where they are now, how much of it was perseverance and determination, or how much of it was just plain luck, and how do they go about creating something great. This is a chance to explore what drives these talented individuals or their studios to create great. Hello and welcome to the first episode. This is a totally new experience for myself and probably for Paul, but either way we're both hopefully excited and slightly nervous. So my first guest I've got to know recently is Paul Blackburn. Paul is the founder of StudioBlackburn, an international brand strategy and design studio. They inspire desire for brands and businesses that improve people's lives. I first became interested in StudioBlackburn's work when I received a typographic Euros poster many moons ago. Paul, I think I might still have it. But recently, StudioBlackburn have rebranded So Energy, and their great print and digital campaign for We Mean Green, which ran for 8 weeks, was used to promote the environmental benefits of rail travel during COP26. And when I posted this on Instagram, well, it got a few reactions, and I'm sure Paul and I might go there.
Yeah, we might do.
We might do. Anyway, good morning, Paul. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you. It's a nice sunny morning here in Blackheath, so I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, it makes a change, doesn't it? So what I want to do basically with this podcast is really sort of go back to the beginning, understand, what your inspirations were, what attracted you to design, graphic design or design. And are those inspirations still relevant today or have they changed?
Okay, well, I've been thinking a little bit about this, having been invited on the podcast. And you were kind enough to send through a sort of outline of some of the questions and points that we were going to talk about. And I realized that I've never, ever had anyone ask me how I first got into this and what interested me about graphic design. So it's been quite interesting process for me to think about. And the quick answer is I can't remember. I'm too old. But but having thought about it and looked back, I can at school I was academically strong, I guess, and was expected to go through to sixth form college and go to university, and probably, if my dad had have had his way, become an accountant and worked in Leeds or somewhere. I don't know, something like that. But it never ever appealed to me. I really loved art at school from about age 10 or 11 onwards. And I can't remember why I got into it, but I remember there being lots of art books lying around in the house. And I think my dad had studied art at one point in his life. And I had all these books about Cubists and Fauvists and so on. And I used to copy the paintings. So that's how I got into it. I really liked drawing and painting. We had an architect that lived next door to us, and I used to draw his house, and then he used to come round and draw it for me properly. And that's the first time I really got an idea that there were these professions that were in the world of art and design. But for me, when I got to sort of 15, 16, I guess it was in my own way, it was my own little rebellion, was to want to go straight to art school and not do the sixth form thing, which is right. What I did. So I applied to Barnsley College of Art and Design, which was brilliant. And the first thing they said when I went for my interview at 16 was, that I needed to really think about the decision I was making, because it was quite a bold one. I could go on and get A-levels if I wanted, but if I went to art college, it was choosing a path quite early. But I went ahead and did it anyway, and I was really, really pleased that I did. And it was a really great course. They taught the history of art and design very, very rigorously. And by the time I was 17, I'd learned all about high-tech architecture, Memphis, modernism, postmodernism,
Right.
and so on and so forth. So it was a really intense teaching of the history of art and the history of design.
Wow. So then, obviously, after Barnsley, you would have hopefully got a job. I'm interested also about your sort of progression up through the different studios.
Yeah, I mean, I was never that keen on getting a job. I know it sounds strange, but
All right.
I went from Barnsley College of Art to Ravensbourne. Ravensbourne at that time was in southeast London in Chislehurst, and I did my degree there. And it was the tail end of Swiss typography, and their school at that time was based on the Basel School, which had
Yeah.
been set up in the 70s by Otto Leica. So they taught the basics and Swiss typography, but they'd become influenced by postmodernists like Weingart and so on. So again, it was really informative. We used to have visiting lecturers like Dan Friedman, who made a massive impact on me. Weingart came, April Greiman came. So
Wow.
it was the people of the time who were important in the late 80s in terms of graphic design globally. So I left there with a sort of understanding of modernism and typography on a grid and so on and so forth.
Wow. That's an amazing lineup to have. Amazing.
Yeah.
April Greiman, Wolfgang Reingart. I only saw him once at an ISTD talk, and that blew my mind when he was talking about, see all his lovely M's and then semicircles, and he did that all with bent lead, not a computer. And I was like, that blew my mind, because he put it up. You look at it and go, okay, computer generated. Then the next slide was actually, it was all done out of lead, and I was like, wow, that was amazing.
Yeah, he was a complete one-off, Weingart, and he gave the same talk every time for years and years. By the way, I mean, if you saw him once, you'd seen everything.
All right.
But it was always interesting. He always did the thing with copars that he thought looked like elephants. I think he was the only person that could see the elephants. But
But I think we all nodded, didn't we? Going, oh yeah, I see an elephant or two there.
Yeah,
brilliant. And when you look back at your career choices, what would you have done differently, if anything at all?
Well, on a really practical level, I would have learned the software earlier, and I'd have learned it better. I think you need to enter the industry knowing how to earn some money and knowing how to be able to produce things quickly and efficiently. And certainly at the time that I studied software, you sort of taught the programs almost as an afterthought. I think it's differently now, but I certainly expect everyone who comes along to StudioBlackburn to be fluent in the specific softwares that they need to be fluent in. I resisted it for a while. I'm not sure why, but I think that I would have learned earlier, and I would have been more of an expert, so that I could just turn on a sixpence and produce work. And then I think the other thing that I might have done differently over the years is just learn to walk away from work and clients a little bit earlier, and not just keep going until the bitter end with on certain projects. I think I've become better at knowing when something's not going to work out. I think when you're younger, especially if you've got a bit of a work ethic, you try and keep going and get the best that you can from a job, even after it's gone slightly awry.
Yeah, that's happened to us many a time throughout my career as well. And
I bet.
And in your experience, what do you think the best part of a project is? And conversely, what do you think the worst project is, and why? And
well, for me, in the position that I'm in now, which I mean, I basically run a team of really talented people. So the best part of any project is seeing something materialize out of nothing.
Yeah.
And it's not that literal. I mean, there is something, there's a brief, or there's a feeling, or there's a direction, or a problem to be talked about. But it never ceases to amaze me how people can create something visual from quite thin beginnings. So I love seeing that come to life in the studio. So the best part of the project is also the best part of the day for me, which is around 5:30, when everyone starts sending me these PDFs that have got lots of interesting visuals in and things we can talk about. It's like getting a little present at the end of the day. So I'm kind of addicted to that. I think it doesn't matter what stage of the project it is. It's just, crikey, we've managed to turn that around today, and it's looking really interesting. So that's definitely the best part of any project for me, and I think it's very close to the other part of the question, which is the worst part of the project,
Yeah.
which is briefing these things in. I mean, I feel that no amount of experience really covers this, because when I brief a project in, there's usually some thoughts in my head and a lot of expectant designers waiting to do some creative work, and often it's working it out as we're discussing it. But I think it's quite easy during that point to feel like you don't know what you're doing and you don't know how to brief these people. It's, you know, you spent so much time with the client absorbing what the situation is and what the issues are, and you haven't got a strong direction. I tend to have a strong feeling about what we could talk about and where we could go with it. And I think that there's that leap in between how I see things and how other designers are going to interpret that. And I think that is I mean, that's obviously what clients pay for. You know, it's like that extra thing that happens. But there's never a guarantee that it's going to happen. I never feel that there's a guarantee it's going to happen.
Yeah, there is that magic moment, because, you know, when you're in the studio, it's wonderful. You get the work up, and as you say, people send you stuff. But that thing of what you in your mind's eye think, all right, this is the solution. Then give it 3 other designers, 3 total different interpretations of what you thought. Oh, right, okay. And then that broadens out, which I think is the best part of it as well. And definitely, you know, when you're back in the studio getting that work up to talk about it. I don't know about your studio, but we're very open. So we put the work up, and then even if you're not working on that project, you can still come and say, "Oh, that reminds me of this. Have you seen that?" You know, that steer clear away from that. You know, I don't know if you're the same.
We are up to a point, and actually we've got an ongoing conversation about how much wall space we need, and we're trying. That's the only thing I need more of at the moment, is available wall space in the studio to get work on the wall. I remember almost 20 years ago, I worked at North for a year, just freelancing, and
Right.
it was a big influence. Sean was a big influence, and he would always say that he needed to get everyone to print things out and up on the wall, otherwise you can't see what people are thinking or doing. And it was a really simple lesson and really important, and it's true, I think, up to a point. The other thing about being in the studio, I don't know if you get this, but it's much easier to spot things as they're happening and course correct. And at the same time, it's much easier to compliment people and encourage people. And so it's a huge time saver, whether it's propelling someone on towards a solution or whether it's stopping them and starting them on a different route. And I love that. I love being the hovering person, you know, looking at screens and seeing what other people are doing. Everyone in the studio does that and has the opportunity to comment. And we're certainly a really kind of discussive environment. We try and talk about as much as in fact, sometimes I worry that we spend far too much time talking and discussing and so on.
I think we've both read the same book on design studios. I think we're very much the same. It's like, come on, let's just do the work now. We've got an idea, go off and do it. Yeah.
It's funny when you realize that all the work usually is extremely high quality, but I think the designers sometimes don't realize that you're talking about little margins, little differences, when in actual fact to them it feels like something they've been working on for a couple of days, and it's a much bigger, it's a very emotional thing, I think, a person's connection to their work. And I sometimes try and remind myself to just say, look, it's actually all brilliant, right? So, and most of this will work, so let's talk about making it that extra 10%. I'm not sure that people always realize that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the curse of any creative, especially designers as well. You always do the work, then you start hating the work, and it's like, okay, walk away from it and then come back to it. Happens all the time, doesn't it? You're like, all right, that's great. Then it's like, well, hold on a sec, I'm not sure about that. You start doubting yourselves, and You
Yeah.
see it all over Twitter now. People are like going, "Oh, if you're a true designer, you doubt yourself." Maybe it's an age thing. I don't know.
Well, you see all sorts all over Twitter. Best not to look. Best not to look at Twitter.
No. Go on and post something, then come off.
Yeah.
And anything bad happen? Home truths now. Is there anything that the worst client has ever said to you, or the best thing a client's ever said to you? And
Well,
what might have been that reason?
yeah. I mean, I've got lots of examples of clients saying unpleasant things to me, but I think I think that's to do with length of time that I've been doing it to some extent as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I presented about 12 years ago. When I was at Greenspace, and I was the MD and creative director, and we did this long project with Zaha Hadid, and it was to rebrand the architectural practice. It was a fabulous project, but a really tricky one to get right. And I met Zaha a couple of times, and she was everything that people say about her, rude and charming in equal measure. But at the point where we presented the finished brand identity to the whole of the company, it was in that school that they designed down near you in Brixton. So they launched the school, and they got all the architects down there, and then Patrick Schumacher introduced me to present the new brand identity. At which point Zaha just came and sat on the front row right in front of me and heckled me for the entire presentation. It was bloody awful. So the thing she said was, I can't remember why, but she really didn't like aspects of the identity, and for reasons unknown to me. But what she actually said was that she hoped that we'd got lots of money in my company because she was going to sue us the week after.
I take it she didn't. I hope she didn't.
No, she didn't.
Oh
but
my God.
It was pretty unpleasant. But then, sort of 30 minutes later, I went up and chatted to her, and we were chatting about fashion and all sorts. And she was lovely. She was really nice. So I think she's a super complicated client, but you learn something from that, which is obviously not to take it. You can't help but take it personally, but not to take it to heart. And just to let things settle down. And people usually are critical for reasons way beyond anything you can influence.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's an amazing client to have. She's an awesome architect. I think you might have even sent me the guideline, because it was the newsprint, wasn't it? It's a newsprint with the metal. Clear foil.
Yeah, it had a metallic
that's it. Belly band.
Slipcase, belly band, yeah. And I think the newspaper itself was printed, I can't remember what they're called, but those companies that just print you tens of thousands of newspapers overnight.
Yeah.
It was a lovely job, really, and they're still using the identity. I mean, it's worked really well for them.
The website was always a bit bonkers. I think it still hasn't changed, has it?
No, it hasn't changed much. No, there was a very good reason behind that website, which is prior to that, I think they'd just got a very, very basic website with a few items on it. And there was always this thought around Zaha's that none of her buildings could be built, that she was a fated architect that had never built anything. But of course, as soon as you start looking at the company, you realize they're building everywhere, and they were really prolific that period 15 years ago. So we wanted to bring all that to the fore, and what we settled on this idea of a website as like an ultimate database. So everything went on there, and it still does. And it's like using a filing system, in a visual filing system. Patrick Schumacher, who we work with really closely, Lee Deverill, who was the other designer on it. And Patrick was great, because he's super visual. He knew what he wanted. He didn't kill ideas unless he really didn't think they were right. So it was a good working relationship with Patrick, and he helped us design that typeface. He knew what he wanted, and they've got a bespoke typeface, and he was very involved in that.
That's great. I'm going to actually jump back to North. North are one of those studios, I almost call it a mystique. There's a mystique about them which is wonderful, and I was always I always saw the RAC guideline. I don't know if you worked on it or not.
No.
And then I always wanted one. And then one day I went on eBay and someone took a lot of my hard-earned cash for an RAC guideline, which I might even get buried with it. Absolutely love it. It's just like one of those design things. I'd hopefully get Sean on here because I'd love to find out about him. So what year were you at North, and sort of were there any notable projects that you still hold in high regard today?
Yeah, it was 2005 to 2006. It was during a period when they were undergoing quite a bit of transition towards what they are now. They just put Stephen and Jeremy in place as creative partners, and Stephen Gilmore and Jeremy, whose surname I can't remember, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I mean, Stephen and Jeremy are both incredibly talented. I mean, they're brilliant to watch as designers. So I always thought Sean had this fantastic eye for spotting designers and just putting together the right mix or an interesting mix. And they were going from a period where they'd had a bunch of really great designers, obviously, like Mason and Tim and Paul and Ben, who had all in the previous 2 years had moved on to other things. And they were rebuilding, I guess, the shape of the company. And I was put in as a sort of experienced freelancer to look after jobs when people went on holidays and things like that. I was kind of like hired help, but I also, it had a massive influence on me because I loved the studio. I previously worked at Imagination and at Landor and other big agencies, and where it was all about strategy and making profit and so on. And I always thought when I went into North, it was just all about graphic design. It was 100% a design environment. That's to do with Sean because he just lives and breathes it. It was very influential. I won't bang on about it because I'll just embarrass Sean, and I know he doesn't like talking about his company. And I really respect that. But they've got something really magic going on, I think, and they have for a long time. It's great, great work.
Yeah, I agree. There's sort of two books I'm looking forward to: the North book and the Cartridge Levine book.
Yeah,
and I'll buy both. I buy both copies 3 times. It's got to happen. It's got to happen. Brilliant. All right. So thank you for that. So quick fire round. This is a little bit of a time that we can relax. We're doing really well. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions.
Yep.
2 answers. Just got to choose one. Okay, here we go. Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Apple or Android?
Oh, Apple, without a doubt.
BBC or Netflix?
BBC.
Radio 4 or Radio 6?
Radio 4.
Yeah, I agree. Universe or Helvetica?
Helvetica. I've argued the toss on that one with Bruno from Dalton Marg for hours upon hours, and he's got all the arguments as to why Universe is a superior font, and I agree with all of them, but I just prefer Helvetica. Thank you very much.
Yeah, same here. And then the last one: salt and vinegar or cheese and onion?
Cheese and onion.
Interesting. Right, we're going down the pub when we can. All right. So sort of going into the last section now, really. So this whole podcast is called Create Great. Create Great is the OPX mantra. It speaks to our ambition creatively. So here's something we were looking at, especially during this sort of lockdown, where how can you keep and maintain that high level of work whilst sitting in your bedroom or wherever you are, because you're miles away from everyone. So that thing of what we do is create great. Everything we have to do is great for us and also for the client, which has raised that creativity in the bar and everything else. So what things actually motivates you, and what's your sort of greatest moment you can remember and that sort of had lasting impact?
The thing that motivates me is part of the same thing, which is I want to create a body of work that is substantial and meaningful, and is my mark on the world, I guess. And the way that I've found to do that is with a team of very talented people. that can create things at the pace that I want to create things and for the type of clients that I want to do it for. I think ultimately I want to live in a visually beautiful world. I mean, I sometimes joke that, I want to walk down the high street and everything be designed by us, so it's like my world that I've created.
Yeah.
But I think that that's innate. I think if you're a designer, if you're creative, you're always thinking about that type of thing, how to make things more interesting, more beautiful, more challenging, and so on. It's a really rich area to be in that sense. And it's, I think psychologically, it can tip you over the edge at times. I think when you walk down the street, and you feel like telling the local gardeners how to do the hedges and things like that. You're not far off people in white coats coming for you, but you've got to be. But I think that's the natural mindset. And then the other thing is I'm just naturally competitive, and it's taken me almost 30 years to realize that.
Right.
That I want to win. I go into pictures and meetings, and I really do want to win, and I want us to be the best. And so I think that married with trying to make things look and feel the way I want them to is the thing that motivates me. And in terms of sort of greatest moments, I mean, when I left Greenspace and I set up StudioBlackburn, and I had all these covenants in my contract from Greenspace, and I couldn't approach anyone and all this nonsense. And I built StudioBlackburn from nothing, really. I didn't have any clients. It was me, 40 in my early 40s, back in my bedroom with a Mac. But within 6 months, I'd won a pitch with the city of Sunderland to do a inward investment campaign. And I remember that. I remember getting the call. I was on a train platform from the client saying that they wanted to work with us. And that was like a real moment, where it wasn't a huge job compared to ones I've done before.
Oh,
but
wow.
It was StudioBlackburn. We can do this. I can do this without anyone else. I can just lead it and win work. So that was a real confidence booster.
Yeah, it's the dreaded pitches, isn't it? I mean, there's the should you do it? Shouldn't you do it? And it's if you don't do it, someone else is going to do it. So it's the double-edged sword, isn't it? But well done doing that. And once you won that pitch, was that was it pretty much you by yourself? Or was this actually I need to expand a team now and actually bring a few freelancers in or experts?
I did that pitch with 3 freelancers. There's a guy called Sam Moffat who then became creative director, and I think there were a couple of others who had worked with me at Greenspace that were involved in that pitch. So I was always going after work and working with freelancers who I really liked. And then as soon as we won that job, not long after, we won the job to rebrand Sage, which is a big job, global rebrand.
Yeah.
And for that, I then built the company with an account director and with guidelines specialist and so on and so forth, because it was a much bigger deal. So that took 2 to 3 years to go from me in my bedroom to having a global client.
Yeah. And I think we spoke when we were on the phone probably this time last year about the whole new business thing. I mean, that's the poison chalice, isn't it, for any studio, no matter how big or small. And we've been fortunate to win a lot of stuff on our sort of reputation. I'm not sure if that's the same for you, or you actually, your approach to it. I'd be interesting to know.
It's just beginning to happen for us. We are getting approaches from people, and we're really having to research why they're approaching us, and they've seen our work in places, and there are very specific pieces of work, like the work we've done for Painter recently has created lots of interest. The work for So Energy, similarly. So that's been really interesting. But what I've built new business on really is fantastic collaborators who like our work. So initially it was a woman, and I still work with her, called Molly Watson, who's a communication specialist, whose work stops at the point where ours begins, if you like.
Yeah.
So Molly was a great source of connections and work and introductions, and continues to be. More recently, Jemima Jemima Bird at Hello Finch, who is an acting CMO, if you like. She does lots. I mean, she's multi-talented.
Yes.
She really loves our work and really likes working with us, and that's a really nice, really nice relationship. And we're very lucky to have someone like that. So there's always been people like that who like our style, I guess, and like me, and feel comfortable introducing me to clients and in meetings. So I think in the main part, our work has grown in that way, by knowing people, doing good work, letting them introduce us to the next person, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a learning in that somewhere. I mean, I think there are brands and companies and people that are looking for really good agencies, and the link is the problem. It's like, who's making those links? And running a competition is a really blunt instrument. I think it's a really for a lot of clients, because it puts agencies under duress, and you're never comparing apples with apples. It's impossible for it to be like that.
Yeah, it's a pain, isn't it? So especially when you've got so many hoops. We're currently going through something where I think we've jumped through 6 hoops out of 8, and it's like, come on, let's go there. We're ready now.
Yeah,
brilliant. And just back to some of the questions, obviously, what sort of advice that you've held on to from the past, which you might have passed down or still use today? It'd be interesting to know if there's anything that someone might have said to you many years ago, and you go, actually, that resonates with me today, all these years later.
Well, there was something that you touched on actually earlier, which is this idea of just stepping away from projects at particular times. And Adrian Caddy, who was my business partner for 5 years, Adrian's got lots of advice about lots of things.
Right.
But one thing that he would say a lot is, let's let the world turn. And I think it's a really simple phrase, especially if you're under pressure and a client is asking for a certain thing, or if you're doing something and it's not working. And I say it a lot at work, just let's let the world turn. Let's come back tomorrow and look at it afresh, because the last thing we need to be doing is dealing with it in a whatever it is, in this sort of state of anxiety that we're all in this afternoon, or let's just go away and do something else, forget about it and come back. So I think let the world turn's a nice little simple one that everyone could do with learning. People should learn to do that just before they go on Twitter or Insta and start criticizing.
Yeah. No, definitely. And Adrian's, I've linked in with him. He's just sent me the new Green Space 21 Silver Linings, which is, or 20, I can't remember, it's downstairs. Really great. He seems really on the ball, and I really love that saying, let the world turn. I think that's a lovely thing. Let's end on that whole We Mean Green campaign. The Instagram, I suppose I am a conduit to all this nonsense, because with the visual I post things and people like them, but then sometimes those floodgates open up where people interpret things without actually reading what it's about.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting one. When we did it and we conceived it, we weren't 100% sure about it. To be honest, when I worked with Adrian, this was like almost 15 years ago. We did something for Honda Formula One. They did this thing where they liveried their race car in a map of the Earth. It was called the Earth Car, and it was definitely greenwashing. I mean, it was a forerunner to all this. It was them trying to get in on it early. But we proposed to them turning the Honda logo green instead of red, and we got a clip round the ear for it. So when we got this brief in from the rail delivery group, it was a really detailed 4-page brief. They're a client that were very conscious that they could be accused of greenwashing. They wanted to do something around COP26. They fervently believe, and backed up by data, that rail travel is better for the environment than car travel. I mean, it's a no-brainer. I don't think anyone would really argue with it. And they were desperate to come across as authentic as they actually are.
Mm-hmm.
So we came up with that line, "We mean green," which suited everyone. It was true.
Yep.
They could definitely stand behind it. And we turned the logo green. It just felt like the obvious thing to do. And what people seem to have forgotten is that logo has been turned different colours before in the past. M&C Saatchi made a multicolored version of it sort of 6 or 7 years ago, and that became a national campaign. So
Okay.
so it wasn't like we were the first ones to do it. Also, it was an 8-week campaign, so it was like, well, let's turn the logo some beautiful shades of green for 8 weeks.
Yeah. I liked one of the comments about how can you animate it. It's like, well, actually, the shades of green do help you create levels of animation. It's just bizarre. What goes through your mind when that happens? Do you think, oh Christ, or do you think, I'm just let the world turn?
Yeah, well, yeah. There's that phrase only helps, only goes so far. The initial concern was for my designers, because some of them
Yeah,
are. I remember what I was like when I was their age. You know, they're so emotionally connected to the work, their friends, their peers, and everyone is looking at what they're doing, and suddenly they're the centre of a pretty nasty pylon. So
yeah,
it's
exactly.
so we spent 24 hours just trying to calm everyone down and not say anything and just not reply to anything, which is what I think you should do anyway on these things.
Yeah,
But of course, the funny thing was, 24 hours in, Mark Ritson put an article up saying how much he liked it, and suddenly everyone liked it. You know, it was like Twitter, it was like pylon of praise. So
yeah,
there's a bit of me that just finds that really amusing, and it just makes you realise how pointless a lot of this stuff is. But what happened was it got put on Design Week, I think, and I've chatted to Design Week about this since. They do this vox pop thing where they just
right.
show something to a designer and say, "What do you think of this?"
Oh,
And
okay.
that was done very quickly, and it was the designers that went. There was, well, you can go and find it online if you want, but they weren't very considered responses. And I think that the younger the designer that gets asked, the more vociferous they are, or the more
Hmm.
critical they are, because it's. I mean, I might be wrong about this, but it just feels like probably, it's their first bit of attention. It's the first time in the spotlight. They've got to say something. They can have a moan, and they can make a bit of a splash for themselves and then promote themselves around social. And what I chatted to Design Week about afterwards was the fact that I think it's slightly irresponsible of Design Week in a way, and they've changed their policy now as a result of this conversation,
Oh, well
because
done.
because I think
Yep.
they're setting young designers up to fail. I said, look, these people have had a right go. I'm very unlikely to ever give them a job now, or to collaborate with them. They're in their 20s. They've
Yeah.
it's you need to set the context much better. And I think we had quite a back and forth with Design Week, and hopefully I think it's helped raise the level of debate a little bit, because it needs to be raised. I mean, graphic design, branding. I mean, where'd you go to learn anything about it,
Yeah.
or to observe an interesting discourse? Hopefully you come to this podcast, obviously, but there's no. I think strategy, brand strategy, that people are talking about that. Pure graphic design, people are talking about that. But this sort of in between bit where graphic design meets marketing meets brand strategy, there isn't anywhere that's really leading the charge on intelligent debate and intelligent discourse, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's all so often just, knee-jerk reactions to things, and people got to realize that this is not like it's done, then it's like hand over. There's, iterations, there's refinements, there's things, there's conflict, there's
Yeah,
discussion. It's not just da-da. It's like, thanks for your comment, but we've done that already with a paying client who's believes in us, and that's why we're doing it. It's always going to be open up to different things, and the more people you bring on that journey, that's better. But it's hard when it's a design community that are just going to react to it because they don't like the color or the shape or
yeah,
something.
yeah. I mean, I've definitely, over the last few years as well, I've seen it happen to other people, and I've contacted even people that I don't know. I've contacted. Who were the guys that did the BT rebrand 2 or 3 years ago? I've forgotten their
Oh,
names. Yeah,
we'll have to Google
but
that.
they suffered a similar fate on day one, and I contacted them and just said, look, just ignore it, and it'll all settle down, and it did, and it stems from the last time I saw Sean Perkins was just after the Science Museum rebrand, and
Right.
I and it was really funny because he's really funny, Sean. You should get him on. He-
Oh, I want to. I
he's
want to.
he's
I
really
want
good
to.
value, and he said that it was awful um, when that got criticised, and there was a massive Twitter pile-on, and it was all to do with, is it Michael Johnson? I always forget his name.
That's correct. Yeah, Michael Johnson.
I believe that Michael Johnson apologised a few days afterwards for the reaction, and I'd said to Sean when
Right.
we were out coffee, I said, I really admired the way that you handled it, and of course, it turned out he was furious when it happened, but he was distraught as well because he was with the client, and he said the client was distraught,
Yes.
and he said I was having to explain to the client that this was all wrong, that all these people were wrong, and that they should just hold their ground. And I think it's things like that. People just don't realize what they're doing when they pile on with all this criticism. So, so you should get that story from Sean because he tells it really interestingly. But ever since then, whenever I've seen it happening, I've contacted people and I mean, James Grenfeld or Greenfield at Koto.
Koto.
I've contacted him a couple of times, because he's. I always think it's funny because he replies to people on Twitter. I'm thinking, God, how have you got the time? How have you got? How have you
He's
got the
got tough
time to do
skin.
it? Yeah, you got a tough skin. There ought to be some. It's not camaraderie, but I think there ought to be some synergy between agencies that is aimed at holding the ground that we're all occupying. Because it's better for all of us,
Yeah.
and the discourse won't improve until we all try and make it improve.
Yeah, totally. What I've learned over the years, no one's ever said it to me, is that just don't piss people off because design community
Yeah,
is so small. It is unbelievably small. And you will go and work somewhere and someone would be like, oh, didn't you work with X, Y, and Z at something? You're like, yeah. And you're thinking, right, have I upset them? What do they think of me? Amazing how insular, it's just so
yeah,
small. It's so small. Crazy. But yeah, I remember when I featured Sean's work for the
yeah.
Australian Museum, which is fantastic. And straight away, why is the UK based agency working on a
That's right.
massive Melbourne art thing, which is understandable, but they're great at what they do,
Yeah,
They're probably the right people for the job. But yeah, I'd definitely love to
yeah.
get him on, just see what he looks like. I've got no idea what he looks like. You like research him. He's like, no idea. He's a mystique. But brilliant. I think, it's been brilliant. Thank you for this, Paul. I
Well,
mean, the maiden voyage, and we haven't sank like the
it's a
Titanic.
pleasure.
So
Yeah, well,
let's see what
I
happens.
hope it works. There was something there was a couple of other things. Shall I keep going? You got a sec.
Go on. Yeah.
There was
Keep on
something you
rolling.
said about the best thing that's been said to me and why. And I remembered, and I don't know if this happens to you, but it happens to me sometimes. I'm so focused on winning the work and keeping the work and then sort of directing the work
Hmm.
that I forget to tell people that they're doing really good work. And I went out for dinner once with this woman called Katie Taylor, who was my creative director at Greenspace, and she said that people love it when I come in and compliment work that's on the wall. She said all the designers really love it when you get involved and say stuff. And I was like, oh Christ, I've got no idea. And no one tells you the good things when you're the boss. No one tells you that you're doing the right thing or that what you did was good.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that it's quite an unusual pursuit, I think, being running a small company because you're quite exposed a lot of the time, but there's a lot of people relying on you. And I think you forget just what a positive impact you're having or you can have on people's lives. So I think trying
Yeah.
to communicate with staff and tell them, encourage them in the right directions is really valuable. But somehow you need feedback from it. You need to see people grow and you need to see people do the right thing.
Yeah. How many people are at Studio Blackburn now?
There are 8 of us,
Right.
nice and small. I've got a theory of 7, which is that I think you should go up in blocks of 7 if you're growing a company. And
Okay.
this sort of dates back to when I worked at Landor in the early days, and no matter what size client came to Landor, and they were all massive clients, they got a team of 7. You know, it's like a creative director,
Mhm.
design director, a couple of seniors, account manager, project manager, and a bookkeeper. And I think you can handle any job as a team of 7. And I think if you get another big job in, you put another team of 7 on it.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah. Is that something you'd do? So if you won a big job, you'd scale up with 7, or would you scale up with? Would you?
Yeah, I don't.
I'll put you on the spot now.
No, it's a really good question. I mean, when we scaled up very quickly at Greenspace, and then we scaled down quite quickly as well.
Mhm.
But I don't know what I would do now. I'd probably be a lot more careful. But I think it's I think it's just something to bear in mind. You know, that at the point at where you're feeling stretched, you probably do need to. It's not always a case of just adding in 1 or 2 others. It's a case of, right, what do we need to serve that client?
Yeah.
Architects do this really well. Like I now witnessed it at Zaha's, you know, when they would literally rent a floor somewhere for a project team, and that would be the project team for a building that they were designing somewhere
Yeah.
in the world.
But it must be hard getting the dynamics, especially with a creative agency and as the creative director over it. You know, making sure that are they randoms? Are they trusted designers that
Yeah.
you know and stuff? Could go horribly wrong otherwise.
I think the dynamics are everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really tricky, and it's never static. It's never, you know, there are better times than other times, but I think it does change all the time.
Yeah.
We have a lot of fun at the moment, I must say. I think that shouldn't be underestimated either. Just having people in the studio
Yeah.
who are interesting and fun and challenging, and you want to look forward to going into work because you're going to have a nice time. You know, you're going to have a good crack.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think maybe that's what I was wanting when I was 15. You know, that rather than a conventional career. I chatted to Lee Maudsley. Have you worked with Lee?
Oh yeah, we know Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
Well, I yeah, he's absolutely brilliant. I went to visit him in his little pokey studio in London Bridge, which I think he still keeps.
Yes.
And we were just sat there having a cup of tea, talking about what we were going to do in the future. And he said to me, he said, "This is brilliant." He said, "Look at us." He said, "It's brilliant. We're just sitting here having a cup of tea, and it's 11 o'clock in the morning. And do what we want."
Yes.
And that's the upside of it, of this life, if you like. You know, I'm at home now. I can do what I want now for the rest of the day. I've got to do the work at some point, but I can organise my life, you know, the way that I want it to be. And I think I don't think everyone's cut out for that. But I think when I was 20, I knew that I was cut out for this, to lead a studio. I'm a much better leader than I ever was as a sort of junior or a senior. You know?
Right. And are you back at the studio now? What's the policy? Yeah.
Yeah, it's
5 days, or are you still
Yeah,
hybriding?
no, we're in. Anyone can be in as much as they want to be, and the majority are in every day. There's 1 or 2 for whom travel's a bit more of an issue,
Yes.
but everyone's trying to get in, and everyone wants to be in, which is really nice. You know, they want to be in and working together.
Yeah, there is you know, that dynamic connection kind of thing, and as you say, sort of remembering back from when we first started talking, that thing of catching things.
Yeah.
I dreaded this lockdown when it was like, send me something. Is like I've had to wait 3 hours. Where in the studio I would have caught that early and gone no.
Yeah.
You know, I have found it slightly difficult purely because of that engagement not being there.
Yeah, I might be wrong. I suspect you're more of a creative director than I am. When lockdown started, it was very easy for me because I'm so used to traveling with my laptop.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's traveling to business meetings or just traveling generally, I just get somewhere, open my laptop, look at the PDFs, feedback. I'm very familiar with that way of working, and I've always had someone in the studio directing things. So for me, this has been very familiar, working at home, you know, people sending me things hasn't been a problem. I imagine from what you're saying that with you're creatively directing everything. I mean, I have a creative director, you know, who runs the work.
Yeah. Very much so. I think that, I think you've sort of hit the nail on the head. Just seeing it, and I tell you what, missed that printer. So we years ago we invested in an A1 printer for when you get.
Did you?
Yeah, fantastic. It's been brilliant. So when we do client presentations, massive A1s, just getting it on, and we're working with a new client who actually came in for a face-to-face, and it's lovely. You see it on Instagram where there's a quick things of me doing this, putting the boards up on the OPX Instagram. They came in, and just to see the face and the reaction was just like, oh, this is what it was like. This is just so nice, and just the scale of it, because it's great looking at stuff on screen, but the actual scale of how an identity can manifest itself across whatever it is, and it's like a huge thing in front of them, and just get it, and it's just like, it's
that sounds really good.
That's what I love. That's what I love.
Yeah.
Just seeing that.
I'd like to come and see that. I might send you some things to print out.
they're £8 for it. No. It's brilliant. It is a really good, just a big inkjet plotter kind of thing, and it's amazing. We've had it and we use it for everything. And sometimes we've given clients the work, rolled it up, and they take it back, so they can then put it up in their office, so then people can see what's going on as well. And some of the old sheets we keep up, and we can reprint stuff out. So when the client comes in, there's almost like a gallery of work, and then, all right, you're into the meeting room. Let's talk. But this has been brilliant. I've enjoyed this.
There's one more thing.
Go on.
I'm assuming that if people do listen to it, let's assume they will.
Well, I hope so. We're in a very small pond.
Assuming that there'll be young designers and so on.
Yeah.
There was something about resourcefulness that I wanted to just mention.
Go on.
I went through a period of, I don't know if this happens to you, but suddenly you'll start getting PDF portfolios sent from a graduate at a particular college, and then you'll get lots more. If you reply, you'll get lots more from that college all at once.
Yeah.
It's like they talk amongst each other, which you completely understand. And they tend to send the same standard letter. They just change the name.
Yep.
And I went through this period of that happening quite a lot, to the point where I just thought, I can't tell who's good and who isn't, and I got we started getting approaches from ECAL in Lausanne, who were all really great designers, fantastic. And all their work was really, really great. And I got one, it was like the 6th or 7th one from this girl, as she was then. This was sort of 15 years ago. And I just emailed back to her, and I think I was really tired or annoyed. And I said, "Yeah, it looks great, but how would I know? Why are you any better than all your friends that are sending me PDFs?" And she emailed me straight back, like within a minute. And she said, "Give me 24 hours." And this was in the days before people were doing websites all the time.
Yeah.
And she just spent the next 24 hours building a photo essay of why we should employ her. She went off around Lausanne, dressed herself up, made posters, put them on the wall, created a website, and 24 hours later I got an email from her that just said, "Click here." So I clicked, and it opened up, and it was a website, and I just clicked through, and she told me all these things about herself and why we should employ her. So we did, and she was brilliant, and she's brilliant now, and the difference is resourcefulness, I think, because lots of people are great. So how can you think on your feet, and how can you do something that's going to be meaningful or different, or that someone's going to remember? And that's what I look for all the time in staff is resource. That's the thing. How resourceful are you?
Yeah. I mean, it's very true. The nowadays everything's on a mock-up. Portfolios look very similar. Certain colleges do produce the same work. I mean, probably it's the same when I was at LCP. We all had our work. But what's interesting, I think, is that even if I look back on my work from LCP when I graduated in '94, it may not have been the best or the most cutting edge, but there's an attitude behind it. There's something that was like, all right, this is what I stand for. And I sometimes lose that nowadays with folios. It's like, okay, it's just graphic design. It is. It's like, but what's your stamp on it? Because your stamp is what will define you as a designer or a creative, not just this is a trend. I'm now going to do totally that kind of thing.
Who were your tutors at LCP? Did you have Dave Dabner?
Yeah, Dave Dabner. So 92 to 94 was under David Dabner, who fantastic, when you look back at what you learn, is all that hand rendering 12-point Baskerville. You're sitting there going, what have I done, kind of thing. Oh, this is good. But it teaches you about the character, and then you go down and do the hot metal and things like that, and that real understanding. And then I'll try and get him on, actually. Mark Holt, I had him back in the studio a few years back from 8VO, come in and talk. And then one day, a friend of mine, Ben Tappington, an amazing designer who sat next to me, it was almost like, have a look at this. And it was like an 8VO. And I remember going down, and I've still got it, to the photocopier room and photocopying every spread and then stapling it together. And I've got the photocopy of that. And that was it. I was like, if I could emulate this, I'll be happy, and that for me was the switch going. That's it. That's what I want to do.
Interesting. What was it? Because it's so influential, that 8VO work. What was it, in your opinion, about it?
I always remember two things. I always thought it was the Helvetica. Then I was at a studio called Thumb. Tim Webb Jenkins was like, it's Unica. And I was like, what's Unica? Like going on to Font Shop Unica and actually buying the font, going, I now hold the font of 8VO. But I think it was all that layering up and just the use of space and the sort of boldness of type, and just to celebrate it after doing that 12-point Baskerville and going, oh, actually, we can turn this up now and actually be a bit more playful. Because when I was at college, you had to book a computer room, and it was like, what was it, a quad 400 or something like that, and a floppy disk. And it was just like crazy to what you can do now at unis and stuff.
An old friend of mine, Paul Winter, who you might know, he's a print rep now, but he is a really great designer. He worked for 8VO briefly. I think he was their first or second or only employee. And he said on the first day, Hamish came and handed him a floppy disk with all the preferences for the typefaces on it. He said he realised that he was like, in those days, it was like gold dust. They'd done all the kerning and everything.
Quark Express.
Yeah, which was great. But I could never, I know Mark a little bit, and obviously I've seen Mark and Hamish talk. And when I was at Ravensbourne was the period when all the magazines were coming out one after the other, and everyone, of course, loved it. My tutors, who know Jeff White, for instance, was featured in the second one, and Peter Ray was featured. So it was around me all the time. But when I met them, I could never understand how two people with those sort of quiet personalities could create this really, exuberant work. And it wasn't until a few years ago I saw them give a talk with the other original founder,
Simon Johnston, isn't it?
Yeah. And he's the one. He was really charismatic, I thought, when I saw him talk on stage, and it sort of started to make sense. They were a weird mixture, a very British sort of outlook, combined with this sort of international exuberance of Simon. I thought Simon was. It all made sense after I met him.
Interesting. I've never seen him speak. I've seen the other two speak, and as I said, we actually got Mark into the studio, which was amazing. I was a bit of a fanboy still am, and I think everything I get from him, I go, can you sign it? And he's signed the book, signed the posters. It's like an online archive of his work. Fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. I know Tim Webb Jenkins quite well.
Oh, great.
Yeah. I worked with him at Williams & Poir for a while, and I've kept in touch. I was chatting to him recently, actually.
Oh, great. Yeah, he was amazing. He was my creative director back at Thumb. He was really good. Yeah. Still see him now and then. He hasn't changed a bit, has he?
Yeah. He doesn't change, Tim, no, not at all. Was Richard Colborne there?
No, days? I don't think so. Might have been before my time. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. No.
Cool. Well, believe it or not, we've spoken for about an hour. We've probably got about 20 minutes of something. But honestly, Paul, it's been brilliant. And, thanks so much. And every success for, and we'll definitely go out for a beer.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for asking me, and I hope that it's been useful. And best of luck with it. I hope that this becomes a thing for you. I'm sure it will.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks a lot, Paul. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I look forward to you coming back for the next one. If you'd like to find out more about OPX and how we create great, then check out opx.studio. And if you'd like some daily inspiration in your life, then do visit visuel.co.uk. And if you enjoyed this episode, head over to Spotify and give us a follow.